Hello, and welcome to this month's Carterette series webinars hosted by the Georgia Library Association. I'm Karen Byers at Georgia Perimeter College. My fellow planning team members are Sarah Steiner and Tessa Minshew. The Carterette series webinars includes notable national speakers in addition to homegrown Georgia talent, and highlights trends, innovation, and best practices in libraries. Registration is free and open to anyone, anywhere. Topics are chosen to be of interest to employees of all library types, and each session is approved for one Georgia Continuing Education contact hour. We're also on Facebook, so please look us up and like our page so you can keep up with details for future webinars. Before I introduce our presenter for today, I'd like to tell you a few technical things. Microphone and whiteboard tools are disabled for participants. You can use the chat area to ask questions. Moderators can see your private chats, so do be aware of that. If you need an attendance certificate, the URL will be emailed to you after the session, and if at any point you lose audio, log out and log back in again. That will usually fix the problem. If you're tweeting today, our hashtag is Carterette. Okay, let's get started. Our speaker today is Stephen Francoeur, and I'm excited to introduce him to you. Stephen is a user experience librarian at Baruch College in New York, New York. And his presentation today will be an introduction to usability testing and how it can assist in creating a more user-friendly library website. You can look at his website at stephenfrancoeur.com. Take it away, Stephen.
Hi, welcome everybody. And I'm going to share with you what I've learned about usability testing over the last about year and a half since I started a new position here at the library. About a year ago, I changed my job at the library. I had been a reference and instruction librarian since 1999, and I moved into the collection management division and started a new position as a user experience librarian. And it was a position that I wanted to do so I could really help the library better design and integrate its online services and resources. I'm going to talk in a little bit about what user experience is and how it relates to usability. But for now, I just want to mention that over the past year, I've been doing rounds and rounds of usability testing on a new library website that we're still working on a mobile-friendly web page that connects our users to mobile-friendly databases, and on our newly launched instance of Summon. And I've got a lot of interest in librarianship, and if you take a look at some of my blogs, you'll see that my interests range far and wide, and that I'm actually on a lot of social networks, which I love. It just gives me a chance to hang out with librarians from all around the globe. So if you want to check me out, the blog where I'm most active is Beating the Bounds. I used to blog a lot of digital reference when I was deeply immersed in the world of digital reference services. And my other blog, my Commonplace book, is where I just offer lots of tidbits from blog posts and articles in library and information science. So anyway, moving on. So a couple of years ago, actually 4 years, well, it's 2007, 5 years ago, I first encountered this video that I think is going to present a situation that was going to look very familiar to you. I'm going to try sending this video to your desktop automatically, but if for some reason you can't get the video to play, it's on YouTube, and I see that one of the moderators, Sarah Steiner, just provided a link to you. For you. So you can either click the link or we'll see if I can get this screen sharing application to work. So I'm going to give it a shot here. And in a moment you should see my computer. Hopefully this is working. And let me try playing the video here.
Stephen, should we be hearing audio right now?
Okay, so I don't know if you were able to hear the audio for that. I would definitely recommend that you take a look at it later after the presentation is over. It features the flight of the bumblebee playing in the background while some poor soul is often looking for Time magazine, and they are deep in the depths of the catalog at Penn State and bouncing back and forth between their A to Z journal list and their link resolver system and buzzing around in all sorts of spots trying to land on the right location. So definitely take a look at that. When I first saw that video, I laughed out loud, literally, because it was such a familiar experience. I've watched my students do that. I've done it myself, gone round and round these circles with these very complicated, tangled connections between different library services and resources. And so that's part of what motivated me to want to get into the world of being a user experience librarian and trying to disentangle these connections between our services and the way that we present them to our users. So let's talk about what I hope to accomplish today. So before I do that, though, I want to do a quick survey and see where people are in terms of libraries that they're working at. So on your screen, above the chat window, you'll see the letters A, B, C, D, and E that you can click on to indicate whether you work at an academic library, public library, school media library, special library, or other. And as you click through that, the moderators are going to present us with the details of that, of the poll results. Looks like we can all see them as they're going live. And I'm going to go ahead and eyeball these. So it looks like we've got a good chunk of academic libraries and other. So the presentation that I have lined up here is aimed at people in all different library settings, from libraries of one to huge research institutions. So I do want to reassure anyone listening that there's something here for everybody, regardless of the kind of library that you're working in. So the goals I have for today, I want to make sure that by the end of the presentation, you're going to be walking away with an ability to define usability. You're going to be able to identify things that you might want to test. You're going to have the ability to actually run a basic test, to know how to do it, and you'll have some abilities to act on those test results to actually figure out what it is that needs to be fixed first or handled first. So that's our agenda for today. And please, as we go, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat window, and the moderators hopefully will help me spot those questions as they appear. I'll try to get to them. So let me discuss user experience and what that term means. So user experience is a subject that actually incorporates the smaller topic of usability. And it's a way of thinking about the complete experience that a user has with a system or a service. And when talking about user experience, it's one of the three parts of that concept that you want to keep in mind is the mind state of the user. You're thinking about what their feelings are and what emotions are being evoked by the interaction with a system or a service or a site. You also want to think about the characteristics of the system that the user is experiencing. You want to be thinking about think about how complex that system is, how usable it is, and that's the usability portion, how learnable it is, things like that. And finally, the other piece of understanding user experience is considering the context of the interaction. Are we talking about a student trying to find an article for a paper that's overdue and they're desperate to get it done quickly? We're talking about someone just casually looking up information about the hours of the library. So it's thinking about where and when and how and what setting the user is interacting with the system. Now, usability generally is defined as having are covering 5 areas. And I'm going to borrow terminology from Jacob Nielsen, who's a well-known writer and instructor in the world of usability and user experience. And he works with Donald Norman, who is a psychologist who's sort of regarded as kind of the founder of user experience and experience studies. So Donald Norman and Jacob Nielsen have a company called Nielsen Norman, and they offer workshops and seminars and consulting. So they break down usability into 5 things. So, and let's focus on maybe usability of a website. But we could be talking about the usability of a coffee maker, usability of the dashboard controls on an automobile. Usability can be applied to just about any sort of product or service you can think of. But for today, we're going to be focusing just on websites and web services. So first is the issue of learnability. And that is a measure of to what extent someone encountering a website for the first time can figure out what to do on their own without instructions from another person. Efficiency is the measure of how quickly can they do those things that they want to do. Does it take a long time to upload a photo? Does it take, is it fast and easy to look up a book or to find the hours of the library? Memorability is a concept that gets at an issue for repeat users or returning users. When they come back to a site, to what extent do they need to relearn what to do, or have they already sort of incorporated and remembered, oh yeah, I need to do this, I need to do that. So how memorable is a site in terms of its functionality and the way that you navigate it? Usability also looks at the errors that are exhibited by patrons or users when they're interacting with the site. How frequently do they get to dead ends? Are they frustrated? They're unable to complete a task. And finally, usability measures levels of satisfaction. How much did someone like a site or a service? How much did they hate it? Or are they indifferent to it? So usability tries to incorporate these 5 things. And when we are doing tests, we're trying to keep all 5 of those things in mind as we're designing a usability test. So one of the things I've been finding hugely helpful to me as I've been learning about usability myself is this wonderful book by Steve Krug, Rocket Surgery Made Easy. And he's written several books about website usability. This is a nice, slim little volume, came out a couple of years ago, that is a really nice guide to doing usability tests and offers an argument for doing usability tests, not just when you launch a new site or service and then you're done with it, but suggests that you need to be doing usability testing on a regular and ongoing basis. And he actually is writing this book aiming at companies and corporations and not so much the world of libraries, but the lessons I think are applicable here as well. So I would definitely recommend, if you're looking for one book-length guide to usability, I would start with this book. There's also a wonderful companion website for it, which you can easily find just by Googling the book title, and you get to his website, and maybe I'll have a link to it later on. That includes some ancillary materials that are also useful. Okay, so what does a usability test look like? It's actually quite a simple thing. The first thing you do is you want to think about some common tasks that you want to have some people come in and perform for you. By watching people do those tasks, you're going to learn all sorts of amazing things about what works and more often what doesn't work on your site or for that particular task. Those tasks may be keyed to a particular website or page or service that you want to focus in on, or maybe not. But you want to identify some tasks. You're going to bring in some volunteers to actually sit in front of a computer and perform those tasks in front of you. You'll observe them closely. You'll quickly be able to figure out what the things are that they're having the greatest trouble with. You'll probably also find some things that you had no idea were there, problems that you had no idea were there. You want to identify those easiest things to fix, make changes to the site, and then go off and do another round of testing. It's pretty much a circular or iterative process. Your website shouldn't be something that you design and launch and then you walk away from it. It should be something that you are continually working on and shaping and developing, in part because it's just that much work to make a site truly usable, but also you need to keep doing iterative design work on the site just to keep up with changes in technology, changes in expectations among your users about how a site should look and feel and work. Now, a lot of people may be thinking, well, why should I go to all this trouble to test? I know a lot about library websites, or my colleagues do, and they all have lots of opinions. And I work in public services. I know what kinds of mistakes and problems we have, and that's great. We all that's great to have that core information. But if you really want to make your user the center of the website's design, you'll really want to start thinking about getting your users to communicate to you directly what it is that they want out of the site and communicate to you where they're having problems with your site. And testing is your chance to do that. When you have that kind of direct feedback from your patron, your customers, your students, your members, whatever you want to call those folks who don't work in the library, you're getting grounded information about how people really use the site. You've got evidence and data. And this is where usability testing kind of verges into social science, although I don't want to overplay that because it's, for most of us, we're probably not going to do it as rigorous as a serious social science research project, but it borrows a lot of elements from social science research methodology. So there is a method to it that does make conversations about design more grounded in evidence rather than just belief and opinion. And finally, I think the thing that I didn't expect to see in usability testing were just all the problems that users turn up, that users identify, even though they weren't asked to look for those things as they are testing your site for you. Almost any experienced usability expert will say the same thing, that you'll be surprised by what you're going to find. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about things that your library can test. There are roughly 3 categories. I tend to break it down this way. I think about the sites and services and functions that I have control over, and by I mean me and my colleagues in the library as the staff of the library. Things that are customizable, very customizable by the library, things that I can get deep into. There are also categories of things that you maybe kind of control. You can do some tweaking and fixing here, but you can't go nuts with it for various reasons. And then there's a whole category of things that you barely have any control over. Maybe you can put in a logo or icon there, or you could change the wording on this one spot. Or there are things you just plain have no control over. It's just stuff that you bought and paid for, or that you subscribe to, and you really can't do much about the interface. You're kind of stuck with it. So I thought I'm kind of curious, since we have a wide range of people in the audience, I'd ask you in the chat windows, in the chat window here, to type in an example of things that you can control. So if you have a moment, so we can all see it, let's see if we can put in some suggestions about things that you can control that might be worth testing. Color, font spacing, homepage news updates, language and terminology, layout, lingo, social media. Okay. What about actual chunks of things as opposed to like the little granular things on sites? So libguides, yeah, I was thinking maybe broad categories of services. Many of us have libguides, many of us have blogs. What other kinds of things do we have? The catalog, good one. Mevo chat, yeah, digital reference services, databases, instant messaging interfaces, directories, digital collections. Okay, so what about things that you, the content management system often controls these things and limits you. So what about some things that you really don't have any control over, or you barely have any control over, that are definitely a part of your library website? Oh yeah, connectivity. The institution's web policies, building temperature. Okay, so as you can see, there's, I think your mileage may vary in how you answer this, depending on who you are and what your institution is like. You may be able to get deep into your catalog and make all sorts of changes there, or maybe not. Maybe you have absolutely no ability at all to change your catalog, or some aspects of the catalog. But it's worth thinking about the different properties that collectively form your library website, and I use that term kind of loosely to refer not to just the web pages, but all the other stuff that you've licensed or paid for, or and that your website connects to. So your institutional repository, your digital collections, your databases, your catalog, your libguides, things like that. So we've got the library website. That's an obvious thing that when most people think about usability testing, that's what they're thinking about. But you can also do usability testing on your catalog, your A to Z journals list, on your libguides or whatever subject guide system you may have. Maybe you can do some work, limited work on your databases. Maybe you're having a raging debate about how to label the link for your link resolver in your databases, or what is the best link to put on the top corner of the database where the vendor has given you some real estate to put in a custom link or a custom logo. You can actually do usability testing to see what works and what users might expect to be in that space. Your ebook platforms and your digital reference platforms, these are also things that you probably don't have a whole lot of control over, or maybe none at all. But occasionally there are opportunities to do testing. So testing doesn't have to be a big, grand, let's look at the whole website kind of thing. It could just be, let's take this one little problem and let's test it. Let's see what's the best wording in our catalog to indicate that a book is available on the shelf. Should we say on shelf? Should we say check shelf? You can argue until you're blue in the face with their colleagues, and we have done that here in the CUNY system. But it's even better if you can actually do some tests with your patrons and see what they prefer, see what works for them. Okay, so once you've decided what service or part of your website you're going to focus in on, you need to start identifying what tasks you're actually going to test. And some ways to think about tasks are, you and your colleagues probably know what some of the major problem areas are. Maybe it's that databases page that lists all your databases and you've never been happy with the way it displays the list. Or maybe you want to think about what are the most common activities that people come to our website to do. Do most people come to check out books, to look up books, or to check the library hours? And you might be able to get some of that information just by talking to your public services staff. You might also just go the analytical route and looking at your website statistics and figure out what are your most popular pages. Maybe that's a way to identify the places you want to start usability testing. Is your databases page your #1 page? Is your library hours page? And look at attack the problem that way. And of course, anytime you're launching a new page or a new service, that's also a great opportunity for doing usability testing and coming up with some tasks. I suggest that you focus on just one small granular thing rather than do, say, the whole website. You focus just on a couple of tasks that people commonly come to your website to do. So what kind of equipment are you going to need to usability test? It certainly helps to have a computer, something that your test participant will come and sit in front of. Could be a laptop, could be a desktop. I've actually even done it with a mobile phone, my own personal mobile phone, when I had students testing a website that listed all the mobile-friendly databases, and I figured the most real-world test would be to have them actually handle a phone that had already set up and loaded up with the page and had them perform tasks on that itsy-bitsy little screen. But you can actually do usability testing with a sheet of paper. You can do what's known as paper prototyping, where you sketch out, either by hand or using some sort of software, some page that you're designing. It's a great thing to be doing in an early stage of development, and actually have people try to perform tasks with sheets of paper. This is something I did when I first was introduced to usability testing about 5 or 6 years ago with the webmaster that we had in the library at the time. He showed me how to use paper to test with people. The great thing about using paper is that you can do some very early design work. It's a chance to get feedback from your users about issues relating to layout of the site or layout of the page and their architecture of the page, architecture of the site. So you also will want to have, if you are using a computer, I'd recommend using some sort of screen recording software. Screen recording software allows you to make a movie out of the mouse movements and the mouse clicks and whatever words the test participant types into the screen. And it's a great document to go back to when you're actually analyzing the test results and trying to write up a report and identify what things need to be done. It's also a wonderful piece of evidence to show other people who may be dubious about how people really behave. Say, well, look, let's go to the videotape. Let's see what the user really did. So screen recording software, I'll talk about that a little bit. But I've actually done usability tests without that software. I just had a person who's quietly sitting to the side of the computer or to the side of the paper being tested and observing and taking notes about everything that's going on. That person has to take really detailed notes, but it's definitely doable. So you can do this without even installing screen recording software on the computer. If you do use a computer, I would definitely suggest that you get a USB microphone that you can plug in, a desktop microphone, so that your patron can sit there, your test participant can sit there and type away and speak aloud what they are thinking as they are performing the tasks. And that microphone will also capture in real time, along with the screen recording software, what was really happening at the time of the test. So a quick note about some tasks. Here's some sample tasks that I've actually used in the past. You can see the ones that I've used are quite simple. You tell the user, pretend you need to renew a book that you've checked out. You've got a loan period and you want to renew it. Or you want to find an article on the role of genes in schizophrenia. These aren't huge, complex, multi-step tasks generally that you want to give your users. And you also don't want to make them do the task all the way to the nth degree. So for example, if I ask students to find an article on the role of genes in schizophrenia, I'm not going to make them, I'm probably less interested in what they do in the database, unless that's what I'm really trying to test, and more is can they navigate to the databases from the library's website, and can they get themselves to a search box where they can start typing in their search words? Or are they going to make the common mistake of typing in their search words into the site search feature or the catalog of the library instead? Quick note about screen recording software. I've used Cam Studio in the past, which is free open source software. It doesn't have a huge feature set, but it gets the job done. And since it's open source and free, you can put it on as many computers as you like. There are more expensive options that give you a lot more features. Silverback, I believe, is Mac only. Adobe Captivate and Camtasia Studio are in the ballpark of like $150 to $250, I think. And Moray is this very expensive software, it's over $1,000 bucks. I forget exactly how much over $1,000 it is, but that's used by a lot of web design firms that do consulting usability tests for corporations and people with deeper pockets. Let's see. Oh, screencasting software. Someone asked about Jing. I don't know how good Jing would be. I guess it probably would be fine. I mean, as long as it allows you to record live audio along with what's going on the screen, then that's fine. I don't recall if Jing lets you do that or not. But for me, being able to capture the audio is a really nice thing to accompany the screen capture as well. And yeah, there may be some limitations on the length of the recording. Typically, the tests, when I've done them, the shortest tests maybe are 5 minutes long, but usually I'm asking the test participant to sit in front of a computer for about 10 to 15 minutes, sometimes a little bit longer. So you want to be able to have something that's going to make you let you do long recordings. Okay, so if you're just a staff of one, you've got a bunch of different roles. You're going to be the person trying to track down test participants. You're going to be the person running the test, recording the test, and this is really key, prepping the test environment. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what's involved in prepping the environment. Test recruitment. In my library, I'll stand in front of the turnstiles and grab students as they come in and ask them if they wouldn't mind volunteering 10, 15 minutes of their time to help us test out some new page or new site or new service. And I've found students are quite willing to do that. If you can offer them some sort of monetary or non-cash reward, they like that too. The last time we did the website testing in January, we gave out Subway gift certificates, not New York City Subway, but Subway sandwiches. And those were a huge hit with our students. So, right, I had a page here. I was going to show you. Okay, so let me see if I can find this. Never mind. Okay, so if you are a staff of 2 or more, then it's more easy to divide up the work, and it gets a little bit easier to run this. So one person is going to be recruiting the test participants and probably also running the test or being the test facilitator. Kind of helps to have that person who's doing the recruitment also run the test. Whoever recruits the volunteers probably has established some initial rapport that may help the actual test run a little bit more smoothly as well. So I'd recommend, if you can, although it doesn't have to be done this way, that the recruiter also is the test facilitator. And then a second person can observe the test and also be the person that maybe starts the screen recording software and preps the test environment. Okay. Another key step is to draft a protocol for the test. Before you get started, you want to make sure that you know exactly what you're up to. You want to figure out what your goals are. Like, you want to find out generally, is our link to our databases working for our students? Do they know that they should be going there to find articles? And so then you might come up with tasks that address those goals that you have for the test. You want to think about how you're going to recruit your people and any rewards, and who's going to do what during the test, what the roles are, what equipment you need. The most crucial part that you really want to think through is the script. I see we have a question about how do you prep the environment. I'm going to get to that in just a moment. I'm going to start talking about the test itself. In fact, you're right ahead of me. It's the next slide. So the script. A script is something that you actually are going to write down, not just so you know what to say, but so that you will read it exactly. And this is where the sort of social science methods come in to play. You want to make sure that you're telling each test participant the exact same thing, that you're not giving them too many clues about how to perform the task, because you really want to give them a real-world scenario. You want to recreate as best as you can the experience of your average user going to the website on their own without anyone looking over their shoulder advising them do this or do that. So if you have a script, you can think clearly about how it is you want to communicate to the user all the tasks to be performed, and make sure that those tasks are detailed in a way that doesn't give away too much information, it doesn't give too many clues. So let me read aloud a script, the beginning of a script that I used in January when we were testing our website. And this test script, it's available from a blog post that I have a link for at the end of this slide presentation. And you can also find test scripts all over the web as well to give you an idea, but this is what ours sounded like. First of all, we'd like to thank you for coming. Before we get started, I'm going to start a recording here so that we can document the session. Please don't worry, as this session will be kept private and you will remain anonymous. As I mentioned earlier, we're in the process of redesigning the library website. In order to make it as easy to use as possible, we'd like to get some input from the people who will be using it, and that's where you come in. We're going to ask you to perform a very simple exercise that will give us some great insight into how we can make this website easier to use. I want to make it clear that we're testing the site, not you. You can't do anything wrong here. We want to hear exactly what you think, so please don't worry that you're going to hurt our feelings. We want to improve it, so we need to know honestly what you think. As we go along, I'm going to ask you to think out loud, to tell me what's going through your mind. If you have questions, just ask. I may not be able to answer them right away, since we're interested in how people do when they don't have someone sitting next to them, but I will try to answer any questions you still have when we're done. And then I'll ask them if they have any questions before we begin. Then I'll ask them some questions about who they are. This is all in the script, and just kind of warm them up a little bit to the process. Another good way to warm them up is to start talking to them about websites that they like. And before I get ahead of myself, let me talk a little bit about prepping the room. So you want to make sure that you check the mic before people come in. You want to make sure that you check the screen recording software. And this is something I learned the hard way. Make sure you clear the cache in your browser. If you are going to be asking or expecting your test participants to be using any sort of search box on your site, you want to make sure that when they start typing in that search box, they don't see in the drop down below of what people have previously typed into that same search box. So make sure you clear the cache so that all that is gone from them and you're giving each test participant a clean testing environment. Okay, I see there's a question about IRB approval, and it isn't really necessary if you aren't going to be publishing the results of your study and your research. If you're just doing it in the course of work, here at Baruch at least, that's been our interpretation of it, that you don't need to go to IRB approval. But if you hope to get an article out of it or a book out of it where you can present the results of the usability test, then I think you probably do have to think about IRB. Okay, so to get each participant started, as you mentioned, you definitely want to explain why you're reading from a script, and you saw that in I hope you heard that in the script that I was reading to you. I like to get them, and this is in the script, ask them some questions about the websites they like. It's a nice way to kind of warm them up and get them kind of in the mindset of thinking about web design generally, because you really want them to be offering you opinions about website functionality and design, and have them thinking of and maybe a little bit more conscious about the ways that they generally use the web, what their expectations are for the way things should behave on the web. Like if I click a link, it should do this. If I click a drop down, it should do that. These are the kinds of things I expect to see on websites. You want to have them in that frame of mind. So chatting about websites, not only is it relevant and appropriate, it also kind of helps get the juices flowing. I'd advise against letting them take a look at your website before you run any tasks, because you really want to see what it's like when you drop them right into a page without any expectations or preparation. As they work through the tasks, again, stick to the script as much as possible. You don't want to be a robot about it, but you do want to be very careful that you don't give away any hints or tips about how they should proceed. You also want to be encouraging the participant to speak aloud, even if you don't have a mic. This is the best kind of feedback you can get. You get the user saying, "Oh, I didn't think that was going to happen," or "Gee, I clicked on that link and I thought it was going to take me there, but it didn't." You really want them to think aloud their thought processes, what their expectations were, and where those expectations were not being met by your site. When the test, as each participant finishes, thank those people profusely. They've done you a great favor, giving you probably more insight than you expected. It's also generally when you are going to be giving them any sort of gift certificate or payment or reward, whatever that might be, for participation. Also make sure as soon as they leave the room, you turn off that screen recording and you save it in the safe place. I've learned the hard way, it's easy to forget to turn that off, and you get this huge, humongous file on your computer. Okay, so when you're all done with your test participants, maybe 5 people have tested, maybe 10. You don't really actually need to stress too much about getting tons and tons of people. A lot of the research suggests that just 5 to 10 participants will find most of your problems. You probably don't need to stress too much about the participants being quote-unquote representative. Generally, they'll find the problems regardless of who they are. It all depends on how much you want to make this into a social science research project or not. So again, your mileage may vary, but it doesn't have to be super strict that way. When the test is done, the very first thing you want to do after the person leaves the room, quickly jot down some notes. I found that as soon as the next test participant comes in, you start to forget all the brilliant insights you gained from the previous participant. So quickly make some notes before that next person comes in. And if you can, when you're done with all the testing, that same day, try to start writing the draft of a report. You want to be looking for common problems, trends, themes that you identified in the testing. And then when it comes time to start fixing things, figure out, like, okay, it's one thing to identify the problems. You'll probably have a really, really long list when you're done with a round of testing. And you might want to start with focusing on just a couple of things, maybe the easiest things, because those are things that you're likely to get done. The bigger the task, the bigger the fix, the less likely it is that those things are ever going to get done. They may just be too overwhelming. If you keep at it with iterative testing, at those chipping away at those little things, it's going to add up. Once you're done with a round of testing and you've made fixes, your next step is to think about doing another round of testing. You might not need to test the same tasks. You might just go back and do something else. The larger goal is just to keep doing iterative testing and iterative design. If you keep making these small changes and keep doing rounds of testing and development, you're going to have a website that's actually keeping up with your users. It's keeping pace with technology and keeping pace with expectations of that technology. So that is my presentation for today. I have some links here to some articles and blog posts that I found useful, and I'm ready to take any questions that you have. So there's a question, when you identify things to change, do those changes have to be approved by management first, or does a web team have the power to do so? That is probably, it's a good question, and I imagine it varies widely from institution to institution, and it all depends on what the changes are. I can imagine that some things are so fundamental that management's going to want to weigh in. It all depends on who's empowered to make what changes on the website. At my situation. So I can make minor changes, but more global things definitely need to go to the head of the library, who then will pass it on to the web developer for the college as a whole. For a number of years, we had our own web developer here in the library, but we haven't had someone in that position for about 4 or 5 years now, so we've had to rely on the IT department here on campus and the web team there to make changes. Next question is, are there any web developing sites that you can recommend to us for use to build our own? WordPress. Yeah, WordPress. I'm not really a web development expert. I know people have done wonderful things with WordPress. Drupal is also common. Drupal is used by a lot of Drupal is used by a lot of libraries for web development. Am I familiar with marketinggrader.com website? It's a good place to start based on computer press. I don't know that site. Let me take a look at it. I know that there are places where you can have usability tests done by kind of random strangers. You pay a fee to this web service, and they will, and you tell them what you want tested, and they'll actually find people to participate in the test for you. And but I've never actually used those services. Let me see what this Marketing Grader site is. Actually, I'm not familiar with it. Yeah, I don't know anything about that. I'm not familiar with that site. Is there a number of participants that should be used for testing? That's an excellent question. A lot of the people that do a lot of the testing generally say 5 to 10. It's rare that that you say that you need to add more than that. Usually they suggest that 5 to 10 will find most of your problems. The danger of using more than that is it gets really hard to start analyzing. Then it becomes a really serious social science project when you have to look at the test results of a dozen or 24 people and try to synthesize all that into a set of findings. So I would keep it simple, and that's probably enough to keep things going. Question about whether having internal staff tests is a good idea. Probably not. Because they are special case users, a special category of users. Your main users, the people that your site is really for, are your patrons, your students, your faculty, your customers, whoever, people that don't work in the library. They're the ones that don't know the library jargon and that don't know how libraries work. And I think as soon as you get librarians or library staff testing the site, they're going to know too much. They've been corrupted, and they're not going to give you as complete results and as useful results. You want to design your site for as wide an audience as possible. So I would suggest not having internal staff be the test participants. Do we go back to the same testers and make changes to get a new crop of testers? I would go back and get a new crop of testers. It's probably just too much effort to try to track people down, and generally I do things completely anonymous with their testers. I don't take any names. I don't know who they are. I ask them when I meet them just to warm things up, and ask them what their names are, and are they a freshman or a senior or what have you. But I have usually a large enough pool of people to go that I can just keep finding more students. Another site for site evaluation. Okay. So are there any more questions? Is there best practices for where on the website information be placed? On example, hours, location, I don't think there are any best practices for that. You certainly can take a look at a lot of websites and quickly decide what seems to be common. Whether that's best practices is hard to tell. The best way to find out a best practice is to test it, I think. Try different. Do something on paper, do a couple different layouts on paper, and test them with some people and see what they prefer. Where do they expect to find those things? Are you sitting or standing in the same space with a tester? Yeah, there are places where they have like formal testing labs where the person sits in a room with two-way mirrors. You think of like major corporations and e-commerce sites. They might do that kind of testing. But the way I do it, I'm sitting side by side with the person. I'm their buddy. I'm their friend. I'm facilitating the test, and we're trying to keep it as informal as possible. There are people that suggest that a nice thing to do is to connect up the testing computer to set up screen sharing software on it and let other people in the library watch the test live as it happens. In the book by Steve Krug, Rocket Surgery Made Easy, he's a huge fan of doing things that way. He'll have a tester sitting next to the test participant, and the computer can be viewed remotely by people all across the company in like a conference room, and so all these different stakeholders can sit and watch like real users interacting with their content. Paper testing process, how does it work? What kinds of tasks do you ask the participants to complete? It's been a while since I've done paper, but I suppose you could do, if you simply want to find out, let's go back to the library hours. You want to find out, should we put the library hours in the top right, the bottom left, the top left, dead center? You could put them on paper. You could design it in Microsoft Word, print it out, make it look kind of like a website, and then go to the user and say, okay, here's 3 different versions of the website. Can you find the hours on this one? And what about this one? And you can see how long it takes them to find the hours and see what their reactions are. Get some real feedback from them about, like, oh, I kind of thought the hours should have been here. That's where I'm used to looking for them for a store or whatever. Just see what your users are telling you. Will we have access to your slide presentation after the webinar? The webinar itself will be recorded and archived for a year. The slides I'm also going to load separately on my website. And there was a slide that didn't make it in here, so that will be in. And all the links that are embedded in my slides, the version I'm going to put on my website, those slides will be live, so you'll be able to just click right through to them. And I see that George has got some good advice about paper prototyping too, that another way to do is actually you could just do a printout of the site. But you don't even have to do, it could be a printout, it could be something you've sketched by hand, literally like on the back of a cocktail napkin. If you go to Google and just Google paper prototyping, you'll find lots of good advice about how to do paper prototyping. Paper prototyping, you can even do the testing at the reference desk. You could just say, as people walk up to the reference desk, hey, could you take a look at this, and just slide over a piece of paper. I mean, that's absolute low-stakes usability testing. It's super easy, super fast, and it can be a source of good insights.
Does anybody else have questions? Okay, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you all so much for your attendance today. We hope you enjoyed this session as much as we did. Let me click forward to the slide that has the URL for our assessment, and we hope that you'll complete that because your feedback is important to us. You'll also receive an email with the same link. If you have an idea for a topic or presenter for future webinars, please let us know. You'll see all of our email addresses at the bottom of the slide. We're going to take a short break now, and we'll return to this room at 3:15 for Creating Content for Teens, presented by Justin Henke.
Great, I'm checking the sound. I'm going to move my mic so it's going to make a horrible sound.
Okay, is that all right?